If you've kept your ear to the ground, you know there's a lot of information out there about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But after playing the game for 6 full hours, it became very clear very quickly that there's a lot in this game that we haven't yet seen. And those are the things I focus on in this video. So if you're hungry for some new information about the first Assassin's Creed game in over 2 years, you're in the right place. I want to thank Ubisoft for the opportunity, and with that out of the way, I hope you'll join me as I dive deep into 19 new things I discovered while playing 6 hours of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Before we begin, I want to introduce you to the new video game podcast I'm creating with fellow YouTuber JV. It's called Preloaded, and just like the content on this channel, Preloaded is dedicated to previewing all of the biggest and most exciting upcoming video games. And best of all, it's free, and just watching or listening is a great way to support my channel. I've left links in the description below, but for now, let's get into Assassin's Creed Valhalla. After seeing East Anglia, the flat and bland region shown in the previous Valhalla demo, I was worried this game would lack the verticality and diversity that made the world of Assassin's Creed Odyssey so fun to explore. But those fears are thankfully gone. Now, I still wasn't quite as impressed with England as I was with ancient Greece, but the region I was able to explore, called Mercia, was beautiful, and it was filled with enough different landscapes that it held my interest. I encountered boulder-laden foothills, colorful fields, and this vista, which was particularly spectacular. I also saw this range of snow-capped mountains in the distance, and Ubisoft did confirm that this makes up a separate explorable biome. I also found many cliffsides and even buildings that were fun to climb and surpassed anything we saw in East Anglia in terms of height. Plus, there were plenty of underground locations as well. You might have heard that Valhalla expands on exploration mode from Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which required you to find objectives by investigating clues instead of following waypoints. This is true, but what I learned during my time with Valhalla is that it takes exploration mode to the next level, and I love it. First off, some main objectives are revealed in the same way. In one example, I had to find a crypt, and my only clue was that it was located at the meeting of 2 rivers. So I opened my map, found the rivers, and sailed on down. Now, some objectives are directly marked with waypoints, and if they look like this, things are pretty straightforward. But if the waypoint features a question mark, well, you might have to do some searching. Here I arrived at a waypoint, only to find, well, nothing. After scratching my head, I took to the skies with my raven and found the person I was looking for perched atop a nearby tower. Again, the game did not tell me this, and I found the quest more rewarding for it. Valhalla also has other ways of guiding you in the right direction without giving things away outright. Here, your raven's vision reveals the general location of an objective, and when you get closer, the pulse of Odin's sight will reveal its location with even more precision. But even then, you might still have to figure out how to get to that glowing marker because it's either behind a locked door or underground. And that leads into my next topic. Some of the most valuable loot in Valhalla comes in the form of wealth opportunities, which often feature chests containing valuable treasure or books of knowledge which provide Eivor with new abilities. Now, it's not hard to find their general location because they're called out with a golden glow on your map, and as you approach, they become even more visible when flying around as your raven. Then, as previously mentioned, you can use Odin's sight to pinpoint wealth opportunities more precisely. But again, that's when things get tricky. I encountered several chests, or perhaps books of knowledge, I may never know, that I just didn't have time to seek out in the demo because, well, they were really well hidden, even if in plain sight. Here's a chest inside a ruined building that, even after 5 or so minutes of circling, I just couldn't figure out how to enter. This happened multiple times, but there were also instances where my persistence paid off. Here's a cracked wall behind which was a chest. To get it, I destroyed the wall by igniting an arrow to blow up some nearby explosive barrels. And here's a wealth opportunity that I could see was underground, but I couldn't get to it until I found this inconspicuous hole in the ground. For me, these mini scavenger hunts made exploring far more rewarding, and I can't wait to seek out all the hidden treasure in Valhalla's rich world. Of course, much of your time in Valhalla will be spent on your horse, but there's more to your mount in Valhalla than there was in Odyssey. First off, your horse now has a stamina bar, and it can swim. But these are things we knew. What I don't think anybody has shown before is that you can now train your horse back at your stable in your settlement. You can train it to swim faster, and you can increase its stamina as well as its health. Wait, your horse has health? Does that mean it can die? I wish I had asked Ubisoft this question, but I somehow doubt it. That said, it is worth noting that you can buy a new horse at your stable, so dead or alive, you can replace your four-legged companion. So I've touched on why I loved traversing and exploring 9th century England. But there was one mechanic that didn't impress me as much as I'd hoped, and that's how it felt to travel by boat. The world features what Ubisoft has marketed as a sort of high-speed medieval highway system in the form of rivers. Ubisoft has even equated your longship to some sort of Dark Ages Ferrari. But while the boat can be fast when you're able to hit a straightaway, I frequently passed under bridges that required me to take down my sail, and when it comes to cornering, well, I'll just say that my boat didn't exactly turn on a dime. This might seem like a nitpick, but at least for me, traveling by boat felt more cumbersome than I had hoped it would. Plus, the rivers themselves aren't very wide, so if you ever need to make a full-on U-turn, which I did have to do at one point, it's just not pretty. I can't think of anything Ubisoft can do about the bridges, but I'm hoping they make the controls for the boat much more responsive. Up until now, we hadn't seen much of the settlement or the base building mechanics in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but in the demo I was able to explore the settlement in full. There's definitely a ton to do here, and a lot of it affects the overall game in a big way. For example, you can construct certain buildings that will boost your stats or give you new abilities. Take the fishery. You won't be able to fish until you build one. Or the fowl farm, where you can raise chickens to feast on and subsequently raise your melee damage. You also have the stable I mentioned earlier, your blacksmith, who I assume helps upgrade your gear, and some other buildings and resources I'll get to shortly. And while this is something we've seen before, there's also your Alliance map, which is where you'll decide for yourself where you want to take the main story. But enough of the settlement in general, let's look closer at some of the specific things you can do while you're there. There are more than a few things you can customize in your settlement. Find your barracks, and you can not only recruit new crew members, but fully customize them from head to toe before bringing them aboard. Next, at your shipyard, you can customize your boat from its hull to its shields to its sail, and you'll unlock new boat customization options as you acquire special blueprints throughout the game called schemes. Next, you can customize the look of your settlement itself. You can add Roman statues, archery targets, ancient-looking monoliths, and more. But perhaps most exciting are the customization options for Eivor herself. At the tattoo shop, you can change not only Eivor's tattoos, which are badass, you can also change your hairstyle and hair color. And if you didn't already know, you'll discover new tattoo designs via a world activity called Paper Chases, where you have to use your parkour skills to chase down sheets of parchment that are drifting in the wind. I tried a few of these in the demo, and let me tell you, they're not always easy. But getting back to my initial point, customization is definitely going to play a bigger role in Valhalla than it did in Odyssey. As I mentioned earlier, your settlement features a fishery. Not only does it unlock the ability to fish, but if you bring back different fish you've caught, you can trade them for valuable resources. Similarly, your settlement also has a hunter who you can visit to trade in parts of the animals you've killed. But what I found most interesting is that the hunter also has this hunting log, which populates with information about legendary animals when you've either discovered or killed them. Should you slay a legendary animal, the hunter will also reward you handsomely, and he'll apparently mount the animal as well, presumably as a decoration for your settlement. Prior to playing this demo, I had heard that there was a dice game in Valhalla, but I hadn't seen it. Well, it didn't take long for me to find it, and it might be the deepest minigame in all of Valhalla. The one round I played took around 10 minutes, and here's how the game works. Each player starts out with 15 points, and the objective is to get your opponent down to 0. To do this, you'll take turns rolling special dice that have symbols on each side representing a different action you can take. For example, the spear will attack your opponent, removing 1 point off their score, while the shield icon can block an incoming attack. After you and your opponent each roll 6 dice, you'll then see how your dice stack up against one another. Adding more depth is that some dice have a special border, and if you roll one of these, you'll get a special token. Save up enough tokens and you can perform special abilities like dealing multiple points of unblockable damage. There's even more to the game than this, but needless to say, it's more than just rolling dice to see who gets the higher score. Whether this game will remain fun beyond the first couple of rounds, I just can't say. But enough about games. Heck, enough about the settlement. Let's switch gears to what is perhaps my most anticipated aspect of Valhalla's gameplay. Whereas stealth might have felt like an afterthought in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, it seems to be a much more integral element of gameplay in Valhalla. We've all seen the hood you can use to blend into crowds and the activities you can partake in, or at least pretend to partake in, all of which will make you less suspect. Now, I'm not sure if this was in older AC games, but in the demo, I discovered you can also convince the town drunkard to create a distraction, allowing you to sneak past nearby guards unnoticed. The other mechanic that drastically improves the stealth experience, and which I've touched on already, is Odin's Sight, which highlights enemies in red. Sure, we've seen similar pulses in other games, but the addition here makes sleuthing through an entire fortress, which I did do at one point, a lot more fun. It basically replaces how you could use your eagle vision in Odyssey, but now if you want to mark every single enemy on the map, you have to be in closer proximity, which makes things more challenging and, in my opinion, more fun. Another thing I really liked about stealth is that if you're spotted by 1 or 2 soldiers, this won't necessarily spoil your stealth attempt. Or at least it didn't for me. I hate it when games alert an entire camp just because one enemy sees you, but here I was given ample opportunity to dispatch any would-be tattletales. All in all, trying to kill every soldier in a fortress without getting caught was probably the most fun I had during the entire demo, and that's a very, very good sign. Getting into the combat, we've known about the dual wielding system for a while, which allows you to hold any 2 one-handed weapons simultaneously. But now that I've played the game, I can say that this definitely changes the feel of combat. First off, your right and left hands each have different movesets, even if they're holding the same weapon. While my first combat encounter didn't exactly go so well, I almost died. I eventually learned that experimenting with both hands most definitely increased my chances of success. In other words, deliberate attacks are way more effective than button mashing. And different weapons will 100% change your playstyle, especially if you substitute your left weapon for a shield, which lets you block. In fact, blocking with my shield repeatedly saved my ass. And there's a lot more to the combat than dual wielding. There are 2-handed weapons, a new stamina bar that keeps you from spamming heavy attacks, and adrenaline, which is required to perform special moves. Oh, and of course, there's archery. But the biggest change is again the dual wielding system. It encourages experimentation, rewards your attention, and I really liked it. If you've paid attention to previous coverage of Valhalla, you know that it features large-scale sieges called assaults. These involve breaking into a fortified castle within a given area. My impression from all prior coverage was that these would be quite challenging. But based on the assault in this demo, that might not be the case. See, I spent most of my time in the assault pushing the battering ram, and in doing so, I didn't experience much, if any, resistance. And once I reached the barrier, it was just a matter of smashing the gate 4 or 5 times. Once I got through the final gate, I expected a full-on boss battle like we saw in the prior demo. But instead, I was greeted by 2 high-level enemies that I had to battle in what was more or less a regular combat encounter. Now, that's not to say that other assaults won't be more challenging, but as for the one I played, it was a little anticlimactic, especially given how Ubisoft has touted assaults as major turning points in the story. I'm hoping in the final game, the other assaults are more difficult and that you can't just breeze through by sticking close to your battering ram. In prior coverage of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, individual pieces of gear didn't provide your character with any buffs or unique stat boosts. Instead, each weapon or piece of armor just had 3 or 4 boilerplate attributes, and well, that was it. But thankfully, that's changed. Now, some weapons and armor will feature special fixed stat boosts, and furthermore, other pieces of gear will feature rune slots. Throughout your quest, you'll find and trade for runes, and when slotted into a piece of gear, these will add an additional stat boost to Eivor. All in all, this is a huge improvement that makes individual pieces of gear far more unique, and it should make finding them more rewarding. Speaking of finding gear, it seemed like you couldn't play Assassin's Creed Odyssey for 5 minutes without running across at least a dozen pieces of randomly generated armor and weapons. That's definitely not the case in Valhalla. As you know, I played this demo for 6 hours, and here are the weapons I started with. So, how many did I have by the end? Wait for it. Boom. That's right, I didn't find or loot a single weapon in 6 hours. Granted, I wasn't looking for them, and I admittedly didn't loot that many dead bodies or chests, and it's also possible that this demo was just light on loot. But I have heard some developers in interviews say that yes, gear will be harder to come by in Valhalla, and one goal of this was to make each item you find that much more special. In any case, if you're looking for a new axe, sword, or set of boots, you might either have to search high and low, wait a bit longer for the right item to appear, or you might be able to purchase or craft them back at your settlement, though that's just a guess on my part. When you do find gear, equipping it will affect your stats. And unlike gear, EIVOR'S stats are quite plentiful. Just look at this list. And one thing of note here is that Charisma seems to get special treatment at the top of the list. I didn't ask Ubisoft why this was, but I imagine it's because Charisma has the special attribute of expanding the dialogue options available to you throughout the game. And by the way, Charisma is upgraded by performing certain in-world activities, for example, flighting, which is the Viking rap battle that got everyone's attention when it was revealed a while back. Anyhow, you also have a ton of other stats that you can upgrade by spending skill points to unlock stat nodes in your skill tree, or by upgrading your weapons or equipping more powerful gear. I'm guessing you could go the entire game without looking at this screen, but for RPG buffs, it's nice to know that you can track your progress as you build Eivor to be your ideal hero. And speaking of Eivor, let's now look at one unique way that Valhalla is treating her, or him. As you may know, this game lets you switch between male and female Eivor at any point during your playthrough via the Animus. With this in mind, I wanted to see just how easy this was, and sure enough, it really is that easy. You just select this option here from the menu, and then you're given 3 options: male Eivor, female Eivor, or you can let the Animus choose for you. Now, what I didn't notice until after the fact is that if you let the Animus choose, it will, quote, represent the stronger female or male memory stream depending on its current strength. I wish I'd noticed this earlier so I could have asked what it means. Will certain stat boosts or skill upgrades that you apply to one gender not carry over to the other? We'll have to wait and see. One of the biggest reliefs for me after playing Valhalla is that I immediately found myself drawn to Eivor as a character. Now, I spent most of my time as female Eivor, and I absolutely love the voice actor. Her distinct sound and accent are great, but it's her delivery along with some really impressive facial animations that combine to give her character what feels like a lot of personality.
Who calls you boneless?
Some background I killed in Hibernia. Used his guts to shine my spear. Called me boneless because I move like a reed in the wind.
Not because you're always too drunk to plow.
And from the time I played as male Eivor, I also enjoyed his portrayal as well. Overall, Eivor is just someone I want to spend more time with. And it doesn't hurt that the writing was spot on, even more so than in Odyssey, which brings me to my next point. One thing about Odyssey, love it or hate it, was that it had somewhat of a lighthearted tone. The humor was even downright silly at times. And while 6 hours is still a pretty small sample size, I didn't see anything of the sort in Valhalla, as the writing was consistently more serious, more grounded, and at times downright dark. Now, that's not to say levity doesn't exist in this world. There were moments where Eivor put a humorous spin on things, but her sense of humor felt, for lack of a better term, more realistic and again, more grounded in the world Ubisoft has created. Furthermore, Eivor's occasional quips each revealed what might be a slightly twisted personality.
If you keep that up, we'll stain the floors.
The place could use some color.
Who are they?
And one more note on tone, if it wasn't already clear, this game is a lot more violent than Odyssey, because, well, Vikings. The last thing that I want to talk about are Zealots. Fans of Assassin's Creed Odyssey will remember the mercenaries. So are they in Valhalla? Well, yes and no. The game features similar foes, but they're called Zealots, who are high-powered soldiers who wander the world, and from what I understand, they will come after you if you do something within a certain region that warrants a bounty on your head. Okay, so yeah, they're basically mercenaries. This right here is the only time I encountered a Zealot, and I did not fight him, so I don't know how tough they are. Also, I don't know if the game has a tiered wanted system like in Odyssey, or if you rank up in the world as you kill Zealots. I did, however, learn that Eivor could get a bounty on her head depending on how this particular story arc ended, but I just didn't get that far in the demo. Maybe some other content creators who reached that point have shared more information on the Zealots. So there you have it. I hope you found this video informative and maybe even fun to watch. If you're curious about everything we knew about this game before this preview, again, check out my ultimate preview. And if you want more preview-related content, but on a weekly basis, check out the podcast called Preloaded, which I produce with fellow YouTuber JV. Every week, we talk news, opinions, and we give our hands-on impressions for some of the biggest and most exciting upcoming video games. And with that, I want to thank you for watching this entire video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a like and share it with friends. And finally, if you want to keep up with me and see what I'm playing, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Quest Mode Games. Until next time, I want to remind everyone to never stop questing.